Hi, my name is Bien. This is Ankin, and this is Nitin. We have another team member, but unfortunately he had to take off today a little bit early. Wouldn't it be great if you can just walk into your house and then somebody would remind you about the things you forgot? Well, that's what we believe that we can accomplish by using technology in a non-intrusive and flexible way to be integrated seamlessly into a patient's home. We decided to use a everyday sensors, but we represented it with a light switch because it's recognizable. But that switch could be anything, and we realized that we could integrate it in a way that can connect to and feedback data about what's going on in that particular room. So if you were to walk into, wake up one morning, walk into the washroom, turn on the light, it would be nice for someone to remind you, hey, don't forget to brush your teeth. Or hey, don't forget to flush the toilet. Or walk into the kitchen. Because when we were talking to some of the patients, they told us about how they would put little sticky notes everywhere in the kitchen and kind of remind them, but sometimes they would ignore it. So in combination with a little bit of like audio and a little bit of data and location tracking and keeping a database of it, we were able to actually predict with some degree of like artificial intelligence that this individual typically wakes up between 8 and 10 in the morning and goes to the washroom, and we should remind them at that particular interval of time. And over a period of time, after been tracking and logging in all this database, we realized that we can also use that information to also send text messages through the same system to the caregivers to notify them, hey, you know, Beatrice didn't wake up this morning. It's kind of funny, she usually does. And she usually walks into the washroom and turns on the light. So I'm going to have Adkin here with the demonstration, and he'll walk you guys through it.
Sorry about this. The way that this is set up, the switch is kind of here, so I'm not going to be in camera. So what we have set up here is an everyday switch, and we have it hooked up to an Arduino. So what the Arduino does is essentially, in this case, gives us a 1 and 0 representation of what the switch is doing. So for our use case, it's a switch, but it could very easily be any other sensor. So it could know your proximity as to if you're in the house or in that room. It could be a distance sensor, so know if you're standing in front of something. And you could also log time to see how long you've been there. So there are a host of other sensors that we can use. And there are everyday sensors that we're already using. So I have a Bluetooth module as well, which I can use to scan the room. And without going to the low energy Bluetooth, just using the regular Bluetooth like on your phone and on your watches, know where if you're in the house or not, right? With no additional hardware per se. So what we've set up is when you flick the switch now, a state is changed. It notifies the Raspberry Pi, which goes on to our servers, and through the website, the triggers that we've set, it will fire those. So we've set up some conditions. What happened here? I gotta see what's happening. On the MP3? Okay. Sort of does that. Let me flick it again. Okay. So we set up. Hold that doesn't work. So we set up a few scenarios. So one case is when we get a push notification. So this is when we are outside of the house. The other case is we try to use the speaker, and it actually uses a pre-recorded MP3 with a voice that is familiar to the patient. We also have text-to-speech, so in cases where we do not have the audio file, we can fall back on the text-to-speech synthesis. I'll have to work out the kinks on that. I don't know why that's not working right now. We also use the same Twilio API to use the SMS notifications. So if they do not have data, and so we can get an SMS instead. And all of these notifications will then be based on the contextual information that we've collected and the reminders that have been set through the website. I probably have to reset the volume on that. That's what happened when I reset When I restart the Raspberry Pi, it sets the volume back to 0, so I should probably just set the volume up again. Let me work that while you talk.
So I could try to, I guess, answer some questions. I guess.
We still have the web portal.
Oh yes, that's right. Yeah. Here, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk about the back end of the system. So in the future, we would like it to be partially artificially intelligent, so that based on the trends of how you're using, how the sensors interact with your day-to-day life, nobody would have to configure it. But at this stage, we do have a web portal that we tried to keep as simple as possible, so that a caregiver could enter some...
Hey Beatrice, remember to turn off the lights.
Sorry, that was an example of one of our audio recorded voice announcements going off because of switching the, turning on the switch. So in the terminal, it's pretty simple. We envisioned maybe a sticker on one of the sensors, just has a unique ID that we put in, like 617. And if it's when we want it to turn on, we say 1. And say it's something that we're trying to, yeah, it's time specific. So if for some reason the person that we're worried about is turning on the light at 1 a.m., then we might want to send some sort of prompt that, hey, it's nighttime. Maybe you should go back to bed. So we just set a time range for that to happen. So if it's not in this time range and they turn on the light, we don't want to be intrusive in their day-to-day life. And that's hopefully what we can do by making our prompts a little smarter, so that it doesn't get repetitive. It doesn't talk down to them by prompting them even when they don't need it. So we simply put in a message here or a URL link to an MP3 of someone they actually know talking to them, so it's a familiar voice, and it adds it to our list of current triggers, and our system handles the rest for us. Is there any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, are there?
I love that you built a light switch with wires and lights blinking.
It was fun and
10 points right there. Can you just, I was intrigued by how seamless you're trying to make this, so it's as low fuss and you don't have like an installed base that's going to, as technology evolves. So just talk to a little bit about how the sensors might work in line with that philosophy, because it sounds like there is some kind of a physical interface that has a code and stuff like that.
Yeah, right. So we went through a few iterations. So this current Wi-Fi has a lot of security, so it's kind of hard to work around that. What we were trying to do was make it self-contained. So the Raspberry Pi is the one that broadcasts its own network, so you don't actually need internet or anything, and the device is connected directly to it. We didn't really get around to doing that yet, but that's definitely possible. So what we'd really like to do is have the Raspberry Pi, just plug it in to the wall, and it should be a very simple plug-and-play setup from that moment. You get the sensors that you need and you want in monitors, that you can start building out different types of sensors. So it can be proximity, which can be just based on Bluetooth, very simple, know if you're in the house, outside the house, which is a very great start without any additional hardware. You can build out light switches like this. And we can have proximity sensors, just knowing if you're standing in a particular location for some amount of time. And all of those will basically be able to now connect to the Raspberry Pi, and we can start populating a database of our own sensors that it can recognize and know how to deal with. Nitin was also researching another USB device. You can talk more about it.
So I'm aware that automation systems already exist out there, and I don't expect that we'd replace all of them. This system allows us to create some custom ones if we want. One innovative solution that we thought of is, we heard a lot about blister packs for medications. So a simple thing we could do would be to have a weight sensor that they put their blister pack on. So if they do take their medication in the morning, we'll know that the weight of the blister pack has gone down. We won't need to prompt them that they need to take their medication. And if they do pick it up at the wrong time, we can notify someone that such a thing happened.
You know, you can also talk about the USB to talk about the interaction.
Yeah. So the home automation systems that we have seen, they could connect to our system as well. So one of them was simply a USB plug-in, and whatever devices that you wanted to connect in your home, you could, and they'd probably be at the same price point that they'd be at for us to create, most likely.
I just want to say congrats. It was really well done. I think that last point is what I would recommend is, really try to integrate. There's all these Siri at home type things. There's Ubi here in Toronto. There's Jibo, and there's, where these Kickstarter campaigns are really taking off with people putting in sort of a connected device in the home. And if you built a platform specific for something that you believed in, it might really be a better business than trying to do another at-home, automation system.
Right, so we looked at the Ubi as well, and we just wanted to keep this like a really low price point, so we didn't integrate it in the 24 hours, but definitely it's good for like doing the voice capture and being able to run custom behavior and commands. It has sensors on board as well, so I personally use it just for a very simple thing where like when the light and the noise level go below a certain level, it just wishes me good night. It's just kind of cute, but it works really well for that.
I just wanted to ask a question. In terms of the interface, there's this configuration on the web portal you showed. What are your ideas on making this a little bit more user friendly? Keeping in mind that a lot of people who will be using this will be caregivers and not necessarily people familiar with technology.
And I guess we have more to add.
There might be different angles of looking at this, but when we originally developed it, we were really thinking of that this wasn't actually a website for the caregiver or the patient themselves. It was really to be set up by somebody initially, right, with all the sensors in place, and it would only be accessed by researchers or people who would be more interested in understanding from a clinical standpoint on how to monitor what's going on in the daily activity of this individual. So.
I think another thing that we were looking at was not having the user populate this at all, right? So obviously it's hard to do in 24-hour hackathon, but we wanted to maybe implement some sort of machine learning that we alluded to earlier. So try and understand their daily behaviors through our sensors and see how they're being used, and then if there's deviation, the same kind of thing that you do in intrusion detection, right? So it's the same pattern, you study the pattern and you see if there's deviation. So that is where you would want to be heading, because at the end of the day, all this stuff, the technology is just supposed to make your life easier. You don't want to go and muck around with websites and have them set up